Class 9, let's continue the chapter number 5, the Mauryan Empire. Greatness of Chandragupta Maurya. So it has been described that Chandragupta Maurya was the first historical emperor of India, and he is the founder of, or he was the founder of Mauryan dynasty. So his empire extended up to the Mysore in south and Kabul in the northwest. It stretched from Saurashtra in the west up to the Bengal in the east, right? So according to him, according to the Jain tradition, it was said that Chandragupta Maurya renounced his princely life. He renounced worldly pleasures and started settling down at the place Ravan Belgola in southern India, and there is a hill nearby called Chandragiri, which seems to have named after him. And this, from Kautilya's Arthashastra, we gain a lot of knowledge about the Mauryan administration and life of the people. Now come to the next emperor, that is King Bindusara. So the first ruler of Mauryan dynasty was Chandragupta Maurya, and he ruled for approximately 25 years. And after Chandragupta Maurya, this Bindusara succeeded him, and Bindusara reigned for 27 years, right? So some scholars have suggested that the annexation of Deccan was effected during Bindusara's reign, and Greek historians also tell us that the friendly relations between India and the Greek powers continued unbroken throughout the reign of Bindusara. According to Megasthenes, was replaced by Dimachos as an ambassador to the Mauryan court. So only these information we have regarding Bindusara, and nor is any very little is known of him from literary sources, as well as nor is any monument or inscription of his time known, right? So only few information we get from the sources. Next is King Ashoka. So Ashoka was the third Mauryan ruler, and he ruled in about 3rd century BC, and he was very prominent. He was very brave and the most enlightened ruler of the Mauryan dynasty, right? So we can say that he lives with us today, as in the wheel of our national flag, as well as the lions on our state seals, right? Okay, as a young prince, Ashoka was given a charge of Ujjain as its viceroy, that is governor. As a governor, he was in charge of Ujjain territory, and when revolt took place in Takshila during the reign of King Bindusara, Ashoka was sent there to crush it. And he was one of several sons and was selected as Yuvraja, crown prince, on account of his ability for the imperial throne. Now next is the Kalinga War, which became the turning point in Ashoka's life. So Ashoka led for a few years the life of an ordinary monarch. It was in the year 261 BC that Ashoka decided to add Kalinga, present day we called it Odisha, right? So to his already vast domains. So the opposition offered to this invasion was so stiff that the conquest involved immeasurable destruction. That means in that Kalinga war, nearly 150,000 persons, people were carried into captivity. They were killed, and 1 lakh were slain, and that many times that number perished from famine and other calamities. So this much nearly 150,000 people were killed, and 1 lakh people were wounded, and their lives were taken, and they were deserted, right? So in this, the Kalinga War was a turning point of Ashoka's career. All this misery awakened in his heart the feelings of profound sorrow and regret. After that war, when he saw the bloodshed, then his heart, he felt like anything, right? So he was profound, the feelings of profound sorrow and regret knocked him down, and the war drum was silenced forever. From that time onwards, Ashoka preached nothing but Dhamma, that means Dharma, that means peace, right? He became follower of Lord Buddha and employed his unlimited power and resources in teaching and propagation of the ethical system which is known as Dhamma, the law of pity. With the death of Ashoka, the modern dynasty ceased to be a political force, though later rulers continued for a little more than 50 years. Finally, the dynasty came to an end and gave rise to the Pushyamitra Sangha in that dynasty, Sangha dynasty, in the year 187 BC. Now let's talk about the Mauryan administration. So we get information about regarding this administration of Mauryan Empire from Kautilya's Arthashastra, right? So the king was the supreme head of the state and had a military, judicial, and executive powers. So king was the head of that kingdom also, military also, and judicial and executive powers. He had the ultimate power to enact laws, to make laws. And we learn from Megasthenes that the king was a very hard-worked official who does not sleep in daytime but remains in the court the whole day. So from that we come to know that the king does not sleep in the daytime, and he worked whole day, right? And Kautilya divided the king's day into 8 parts. It was the king's duty to give close attention to people's welfare, social order, and military action. So this information we get from Kautilya's Arthashastra. Next is Council of Ministers. That means Mantri Parishad. It's a members of a Council of Ministers, right? So their work is to advise the king. They were small in number but very influential, very important, very influential. At times, the Mantri Parishad could act as a check on the king's powers also. So the ministers definitely advise the king in the task of choosing governors, general of the army, treasurer of the state, chief magistrates, and other high officials, right? Next is a network of spies. The Mauryan state made extensive use of reporters and spies to keep the emperor well informed about his opponents, about his enemies, right? And their activities, and enemies' activities. So Megasthenes calls spies overseers, right? This word is important, overseers. Kautilya called them the Guda Purushas. That is the secret agents, right? Secret agents. They reported to the king important matters concerning the army, the state, and the conduct of his officers. So their work, the work of the secret agents was to keep informing about the opponents and their activities, and keep on reporting to the king about the important matters concerning the army, the state, and the conduct of his officers, right? Now next is sources of revenue. Arthashastra provides a detailed list of the sources of revenue, also taxes, which include land revenue from mines and forest, and revenue from manufactured goods of various kinds, toll taxes also, and bridges, taxes from bridges, roads, fines, license fee. Kautilya said that the taxes must be reasonable, right? The ruler should act like a bee which collects honey without causing damage to the flower. The land tax varied from one third to one sixth of the produce paid either in cash or in kind. So the land revenue was varied from one third to one sixth of the produce according to the production. So, and that could be in the form of cash. Tax could be in the form of tax or in the form of kind, articles or things. There was considerable expenditure on public works, especially construction of roads, wells, and rest houses. Other major expenditure was a large army and salaries paid to the officers, army officials, we can say. Provincial administration, next to the emperor, ranked the governors in charge of the provinces area. The Ashokan inscriptions mention 4 such governor posted: Takshila, northern province; Ujjain, western province; Tosali, eastern province; and Suvarnagiri, that is southern provinces. Southern province. The governors had their ministers and also had the power to appoint a few officials to assist them. The smaller provinces were under the officials called Pradesikas in the Ashokan edict. So these all information we get from the Ashokan edicts. District administration and other officials. Okay, district administration and other officials. So provinces were subdivided into districts for the purpose of administration. Ashokan inscriptions refer to 3 classes of high officials, and those 3 were Rajukas, Yuktas, and Mahamatras, right? So the Yajukas were probably in charge of districts and correspondent to the district magistrate, that is DM, of the present day, and they managed the state property and kept law and order in the to maintain law and order in the district. The Yukta was probably a district treasury officer who probably the district treasury collected revenues and kept that records, right? Accounts, kept that accounts. And the Mahamatras were the heads of special departments. Like Ashoka created a new class of Mahamatras, that is a Dhama. Mahamatras who promoted Dhama, that means Dharma, and looked after the general happiness and welfare of that people of Mauryan kingdom, right? So the city administration, Arthashastra mentions the Nagraka, who function as a city superintendent or a city magistrate, with a number of officers assisting him. The duties of Nagraka, according to the Kautilya, were the provisions of water to the city dwellers, the maintenance of the public roads and public buildings, and the inspection of city walls and city towers and taking precautions against fire. Right? So Megasthenes, on the other hand, gives a more elaborate system of city administration. According to Megasthenes, entrusted with the city administration were divided into 6 brood of 5 persons each board 6 boards of 5 persons each, and each board dealt with a specific function, such as the supervision of trade and commerce, or census of population, that means counting of person, and or care of foreigners, and so on and so forth. And the 6 boards acted together in general matter like the maintenance of public buildings, fire protections, care of wells and temples, public buildings and your parks, etc. Right? Now next is administration of justice. So Megasthenes also writes about the efficient administration of the criminal law. Serious offenses were visited with dealt penalty also, and lighter crimes were punished by cutting off nose or shaving off offenders' hair. So the punishment was like this, Like if lighter crime were committed by the person, then um, he or she was punished by cutting off nose or shaving off hair, right? A penalty also that made one feel ashamed. Evasion of taxes on goods sold or of municipal cases was regarded as a serious offense. So laws concerned with crimes were very severe and punishment were exceptionally harsh. So if the cases regarding the taxes on goods sold and of municipal cases, then in that cases serious offenses, they were given very severe punishment, right? So now next is peace and good order. Peace and contentment prevailed throughout the empire. That means throughout the empire there was peace, and there was no cases, means very rare cases of robbery, and houses were usually left unguarded, right? And such a situation was a result of mainly three factors, because people left their home like this only. They did not lock their houses, they left unguarded, and that situation is because of three factors. One is the general honesty of the people. Secondly, efficient administration of the criminal law. And third is the modern economy based on productive agriculture and lucrative business and trade. Clear? So these were the factors why people left their houses unguarded, right? Productive agriculture and lucrative trade is also important topics, so you need to go through these topics also. Now come to the architecture. So we'll talk about the architecture. So we have already referred to the style, layout, and artistic or decorative features of Sanchi Stupa. And in fact, the main examples of modern architecture were: number one, remains of royal palace and the capital city of Patliputra, and Ashokan pillars and stupas. So we have another great example of architecture like rock-cut Chaitya caves of Barber Hill near Gaya, and some Yaksha and Yakshini figures that have been found from the Mathura and Patna. So these beside these, the pillars are the best specimens of Mauryan architecture, right? Now next is the Dhama, that means the Dharma. The horrors of a single war convinced Ashoka that the chiefest conquest is a conquest of right and not of might. Fundamental principles of Dhamma or Dharma doesn't mean that Dharma, the word Prakrit word Dhamma and the Sanskrit word Dharma doesn't mean that it's a religion. So Dhamma or Dharma dealt with justice, equality, law, purity, and duty, right? So the fundamental principles of Ashoka's Dhamma are purity of domestic life and truthfulness. Secondly, toleration, not to speak evil of others' religion or religious faith. Ahimsa, that is sanctity of life, and true ceremonial, right? So Ashoka declared that the true ceremonial was like kindness to living creatures and liberty to ascetics and Brahmins, right? So that means he meant to say that love to or kind to living creatures, especially animals, as well as liberty to ascetics and Brahmins, right? So these are the principles according to fundamental principles according to the Ashoka's Dharma. Next is means adopted for the propagation of Dharma and the spread of Buddhism. King Ashoka, he left all the worldly pleasures. That means royal hunt. He gave up the royal hunt, as well as he stopped killing the living creatures also, and he followed a policy of religious tolerance and made donations to the Brahmins and the ascetics of different religious sects, right? Officers of state were required to tell people about their duties, and Ashoka created a special class of officers called Dhamma Mahamatras, who were charged with the duty of enforcing the moral code and looking after the welfare of the people. Fourth, Ashokan edicts are mainly religious in character. They require people to cultivate purity of life, to be tolerant to other religions also, or religious faith, and to abstain from killing or injuring animals, and to be charitable to all. Royal missionaries were sent to all frontiers of the empire, and to Sri Lanka also, Syria and your Egypt, Macedonia, for the propagation or for the spread or for the propagation of Dhamma and the spread of Buddhism. In this way, Ashoka was successful in transforming Buddhism from an Indian sect into one of the great religions of the world. So this is how Ashoka helped in spreading or propagation of Dhamma and the spread of Buddhism. Now next is Ashoka's place in history. So Ashoka was one of the greatest kings in the history of the world. He was inspired by the zeal of the religious missionary. At the same time, he never forgot that he was a king as well. He never neglected his kingdom or his princely duties. So beside the propagation of Dhamma, he was very much concerned about his kingdom and the welfare of his people also, right? So he was not content with mere preaching. He practiced what he preached. His greatness lay in the fact that he was liberal and generous to those who had a different faith. In his seventh pillar edict, he orders the Dhamma Mahamatras to look after the Brahmins and the Ajivikas. During his pilgrimage to the Buddhist places, he made generous donations to Brahmins and ascetic of other religious sects also. So from this we can say that he had a tolerance of other religions also, because he had offered donations he had offered donations to Brahmins and ascetics of other religious sects, right? So next we have the last topic is decline of the Mauryan Empire. So the decline and the fall of Mauryan has been attributed to many factors. According to some scholars, Ashoka's pacifist policies led to the decline of the empire. Some historians told that the Ashoka's pro-Buddhist policies resulted in Brahmanical counter-revolutions. They led to a revolt whose leader was Pushyamitra, the founder of Sangha dynasty. In fact, there were several reasons why the Mauryan Empire broke down or broke up. So the first reason is the empire was too large, very big, right? So it needed a strong hand to hold it together, but Ashoka's successors were weak. So Ashokan empire was a vast empire, so it needed a strong hand, we can say a strong king like Ashoka to hold that vast kingdom, right? But his successors were very weak. So this could be one of the reasons. Secondly, the enormous expenditure on the army and the payment to the state officials created a financial crisis there. So it seems that the later kings failed to collect taxes from the people, therefore, they could not bear the cost of maintaining a large army. So, a vast empire means standing army. So, standing army means much expenditure. So, Ashoka was successful in maintaining that standing army. He was successful in paying a regular salary, and he was successful in spending much amount on the army and payment to those officials, army officials. But it seems that the later kings after Ashoka, they were unable to pay or not bear the cost of maintaining a large army, because they were not able to, or they failed to collect the taxes from the people, right? Okay, third reason, the chiefs of Kalinga and the southern provinces revolted against the kings. They freed themselves from the control of the Mauryans, and they started ruling themselves. The strong governor, they started making up their own province, right? And Ashoka's successors could not pay attentions to safeguarding the northwestern frontier. The Greek kings began to invade the northwestern India. So the northwestern frontier, that border, became the weak zone. So Ashoka's successors, the king after Ashoka, they could not pay attentions on that northwest frontier, and the Greek kings, they started invading northwestern India. So these were the factors which contributed to the decline and the fall of the Mauryan Empire. So it was under these circumstances, as we have already discussed about the factors responsible for the decline and the fall of the Mauryan Empire. Under these circumstances, the last Mauryan ruler was killed by Mauryan general Pushyamitra Sangha. So it might have taken place in 187 BC. That was the end of Mauryan Empire and the rise of Sangha dynasty. Clear? Okay. So children, here we have completed lesson number 5, the Mauryan Empire. I hope you have understood the chapter, and I want everybody revising this chapter, right? Okay children, I hope you have got the syllabus and date sheet of half-yearly examination. So all the very best for your examination, and soon we'll meet in the next video after your half-yearly examination. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and all the very best for your examination. Thank you.